Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of the Sundstrom HSEQ Leaders podcast. As we're getting closer to Christmas, I'm wearing a t-shirt here and a little down dress, but my guest today definitely isn't. That's Andrew Chandran, who's going to join us today on the podcast. Andrew, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, John. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, as a safety professional, fill in to our listeners, I guess, the cliff notes of your career. Tell us about yourself and a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career in work health and safety straight out of uni. So I finished my postgrad. I moved straight into consultancy.
Yeah.
Okay, which is a tough gig, moving straight out of uni into being a consultant. But having said that, it gave me great exposure across multiple industries, multiple clients, and had a lot of mentors as well. So it was very much learning, very steep learning.
And from there, from the consultancy space?
I was very lucky after that to get an opportunity in the oil and gas industry. So in the consultancy space, it was largely mining and chemical industries. And then moving straight into oil and gas. I didn't really know what I was getting involved with, actually, but I went straight from consultancy to regulator. So suddenly I was an inspector now in the oil and gas industry at a state level. Again, that gave me exposure to new people, standards. New standards was, I think, fundamentally different. And of course, then for the next 14, 15 years, my career was in oil and gas.
How did you, if you don't mind me asking, because I get asked this an awful lot, make that transition to oil and gas? How did you find that? Was that a big change from coming from a consulting background?
No, it was relatively easy, well structured, understood. Because I was young and I didn't know anything, I was very much everything was new. So it really didn't matter where I went after consultancy. Everything was relatively new. And to be honest, I'd done it quite hard starting off in consultancy. And so I felt that I had a bit of confidence to take on new challenges as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And before we go into the career side, who are you? Who are you outside of work in a professional capacity, Andrew?
Yeah, so outside of work, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a martial artist, so I instruct and I coach in that respect. So I also learn. You're always learning. Do you know what I mean? And it's a good way to sort of taper out that ego and manage that humility as well. Other than that, I'm a bit of a nerd. So yeah, I play trading card games. I hang out at a local game store, talking strategy, tactics with the locals there. I'm a budding musician. You can see this guitar in the background. I'm really enjoying that. Been doing that for less than 12 months. It's a bit about me.
I guess that strategy piece comes in well in your professional life, but why did you choose safety as a career choice straight out of uni? I mean, that wouldn't have been so common, I guess, when you probably left uni to go straight into safety as it is perhaps these days.
No, I completed my chemistry and pharmacology double degree in 90. Let's see, it was 97. And my lecturers in my final year, Alan McKinley and the late Terry Quickenden, actually proposed health and safety to the final year chemistry class. So this is an area that you can move into, right? Not because they'd blown up one of the laboratories in the past or anything like that, but they were hot on health and safety at that particular time, and it was really expanding. And as a young person who didn't really have any better ideas, I moved into it. And honestly, John, that's it. I didn't have a better idea. Sounded pretty interesting. And as I got into health and safety, I realized, wow, this is a very broad discipline. And then I fit very well into the occupational hygiene area with my pharmacology chemistry background. And that's what I did. I largely work in occupational hygiene.
A really rare skill set in the hygiene space. And I know we've talked about that. Do you think the hygiene gave you a solid foundation, I guess, as your career progressed?
100%. 100%. Strangely enough, the strongest supporters I had in my career were process safety people.
Yeah, right.
Because hygienists and process safety people had a very similar way of looking at hazards. You
Mm.
keep hazards in the pipe in process safety, and hygiene is very much the same as well. If you can contain the hazard, then people can't be exposed to it. So we very much thought along the lines of keeping hazards contained, how they're generated, how they're transmitted, because if you can control that, you can control the exposure to a person. And if you don't have exposure, you don't have risk.
Mm. Mm. I mean, you obviously had that foundation coming through, which I think probably a lot of other people might have learned later on in their careers. But what's that? What's the biggest learning for yourself? If you could go back and speak to younger you at the start of your career, what would you say?
I think don't be afraid to fail.
Mm.
Don't pursue comfort because there's no growth in a comfort zone. If you want to grow and develop, you've got to get a bit uncomfortable from time to time, but not overdo it. Take on
Mm.
challenges that you can succeed at. And as you get those wins, it'll build your confidence. And then you can take on bigger challenges and you go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson for a lot of professionals, regardless of safety or for other lives. But what about advice for safety professionals? What would your big ticket piece of advice be for perhaps people further on in their career that are looking for development?
Yep.
Where would you point them?
Be the best educators and influencers that you can be. There's no
Mm.
point having all this knowledge in here when the people that are at risk are out there, right? If you can educate and you can guide them and they can understand and the light bulbs start switching on, and then obviously being able to influence people that can spend the money, do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Then you become a bit more of a holistic health and safety professional. Have a business background, it's really all business. And
Mm.
the other thing is, like I said before, with hazards and exposure, is we need to stop using the term risk too much in everyday conversations about risk. We need to be starting to using the terms hazard and exposure, which are on the left-hand side of the bow tie diagram, because conversations around those two parameters start to become around hazard management and exposure management, which is where people's train of thought needs to be. If they want to reduce their risk, they need to be on that side of the bow tie diagram. So I would like to see us stop using the term risk so much in everyday conversations.
I think that might be easier said than done, as I think risk is becoming a more of an overarching term just across corporate function, across all corporate functions in general,
Yes.
and perhaps that detracts from where safety is going. But you've been a hiring manager, Andrew. What do you look for when you're building teams yourself?
Yep. If I can identify humility in a candidate, that's
Mm.
a really important one because humility means that the person has got great potential to grow and develop and to learn and to want to learn.
Mm.
Um, the thing is, I know that some hiring some guidance that people get in interviews is, stop using the terms we so much because they want to know what you did. What did you did? How did you do that? How did you get the results? But I like using the term we in interviews, and I like it when candidates use that as well because ultimately they're all hired to be a part of the team. Now there are exceptions to that, but ultimately if you're hired to be a part of a team, it's nice to see that you are a team player. And I think that comes through in the language as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Even for leaders, right, to be able to recognise the performance of a team, because if you're a leader, I mean, the argument would be said that you're only as strong as your team. So, what does that look like for you, Andrew? Leadership. I mean, talk me through that. How do you lead, and what
Yeah.
is good leadership for you?
Okay. So most of my understanding of leadership has come through my martial arts training. The first thing I'll say is a leader is the first.
Mm.
Okay. You can't lead from behind. Fact, you cannot lead from behind. So a leader is someone who is first. Now, this comes down to people that are very good at being first,
Mm.
and there are people who are very good at being first and being correct, right? So a leader is someone that can act quickly, right? They don't sit there and procrastinate. Sometimes you don't have that luxury. So a leader is someone that can act quickly. However,
Mm.
a good leader is someone that can act correctly, quickly,
Yeah.
right?
And I guess that's the skill of experience, though, right? To be able to be reactive when needing to be.
That's right.
Um, you've had a few iterations of careers, you know, from consultancy, hygiene, oil and gas to where you are now. Um, whether personally or I guess indirectly, who's been a leader for your professional development, well, inside and outside work that you know sticks out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people. The first and foremost is Alan Riley, who's not just been a mentor to me, but a dear friend. I should probably highlight that all my mentors are retired. Um, so Alan was the person that saw something in me, right, and helped to bring that out. And that's wonderful thing if you can find someone who can do that. And I always think it's always best when mentors choose the mentee rather than the other way
Yeah,
around because
absolutely.
they see something in you that they want to bring out. Wayne Powis. So Wayne Powis in occupational hygiene, pinnacle of integrity and credibility, and always did the right thing. And Dr. Barry Chesson, so a member of the Order of Australia.
Mm,
I think everyone knows Barry Chesson. Barry's just been absolutely stable throughout my entire career. Um, Pam Gunn. So Pam Gunn was one of the top, acoustic engineers, regulatory acoustic engineers in the state here with the mines department before she retired. John Clegg, who was the original CEO of the National Offshore Petroleum Safety Authority. And we had a very special relationship, John and I. I would walk past his office and he would just say, "Get in here, you
mm,
know, what do we need to do? What should we be focusing on?" And I tell him, and he say, "All right, what do you need from me?" And that was the sort of person John was. And it's wonderful when you have a leader like that.
yeah, absolutely. Um, working with these leaders and yourself being a leader, where do you see the profession evolving in the future?
That's an excellent question. Something I've been thinking about. You know, I have this saying, it's not really a saying. It's not occupational health or safety. It's occupational health and safety, right?
Mm,
But how many professionals in work health and safety are both capable in the health aspects as well as the safety aspects? Going forward as a profession, I would like to see that people develop skill sets to balance out where they're perhaps weak, rather than people call themselves health specialists or safety specialists. They are health and safety specialists, right? Professionals. I think going forward in the industry, we need to be a bit careful as well, this particular industry, because there are a lot of people who would consider themselves health and safety practitioners, but that needs to be separated from a health and safety professional. So I think
mm,
particularly here in Australia with the professional institutes, we need to be very clear on what are the criteria that differentiate a practitioner from a professional. And I can tell you, it's not a master's degree because I used to hold the highest professional certification we had in the country, and I just gave it away because I just did not think it had integrity, right? But
mm.
I think that's where we need to go down the path, is we need to be very clear what makes a health and safety professional as distinct from a practitioner, because anyone can practice, but professionals are the people that should be practicing the correct way.
I mean, there has been a discussion around that, you know, creating a professional accreditation body for quite some time. Um, you know, I mean, there are that within the UK and the US. How far away do you think we are in Australia for having that, and why is the importance of having that for that matter?
Absolutely. So I think if we can, marry up with international criteria, that would obviously be a starting point. So you're not just recognized in Australia, but you recognize at an international level because you meet that criteria across the board. I think that we in Australia are probably within the next 5 years away from getting to that point. Undoubtedly, there'll be a grandfathering type of process, which, is a double-edged sword, is it could water down the initial entrants, right? Because they're simply not going to be assessed. They're just going to get grandfathered straight into it. And then there's going to be the new candidates coming in with all these tertiary qualifications. And let's face it, that's probably going to be a big criteria, the tertiary qualifications. I'm not sure what my MBA had anything to do with health and safety when I got my certification, but it's one of the key things I needed, John, was just having a master's degree, you know? And I think that, yeah, it's definitely one to keep a lookout for, but we also need to be very careful. And the reason why I say safety professionals need to be good educators is because there are a lot of talkers out there. There are people that are great at sales and marketing. What are they selling, right? And if health and safety professionals can become better educators and influencers, then they're going to be selling the right things, right? The right way. And that's what people need to buy. People need to buy that.
No, absolutely. The question I always finish with, though, it's a fair answer. You know, if you could go back and do anything different in your career, would you have, or are you content in the learnings and the pathway that you've had to get where you are?
I'm pretty broad-based now. Some of it by design, others just circumstance. No, no. I think the only thing that could have been different and could have put me in a different place was whether I sacrificed integrity to go up the line. Do you know what I mean by that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I think that's one of those that probably understanding why you're happy and content in the roles that you have made and moves that you
Yes.
have made in your career, right, Andrew?
Yes, absolutely. And I wouldn't have had the mentors I had I gone down a different path. So I'm very grateful to that. Yeah.
And I think I think it's a good tenet for anyone to live by, right? Is to recognise that because it's you know, reputation follows with you throughout your career.
Love it.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much for jumping on for this pre-Christmas edition, mate. And it is always good to chat. And I'll put a link to your LinkedIn there in the show notes. That Andrew, thank you again for taking the time to educate us all on your approach to safety and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Good on you, John. Thank you.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks a lot for joining us for another episode of the Safety Leaders podcast. If you enjoyed it, make sure you reach out and connect with myself as well as Sundstrom Recruitment on LinkedIn. We are the specialists health and safety recruitment in WA. Looking forward to the next episode and maybe getting to know you. Cheers.